Hello, movie lovers. Normally, right here, I have some quippy opening about the movies that released or, something like that. But this week, I'm just going to talk to you guys for a second before we get into the box office. I haven't been around for a couple of weeks. This show hasn't been put out on Tuesdays like it normally is. And I kind of wanted to explain why. Couple weeks ago, I started feeling a lot of pain and had to be rushed to the ER and had emergency surgery for my kidneys, which put me out of commission for a little while. It was awful. Being in a hospital is no fun, and so I couldn't put a show out, and that's why it hasn't been. So I know we have a lot to catch up on. I'm not going to make a chart for the weeks that I missed. I just want to touch upon a few things that happened while I was gone. So Deadpool and Wolverine crossed $1 billion worldwide within just 2 weeks of opening, which is absolutely amazing. Like, who would have thought an MCU movie, the first ever R-rated MCU movie, would do gangbusters? Well, quite a few people actually, because that's what everybody assumed this movie was going to do. I saw the movie. I liked the movie. It's not my favorite Deadpool movie. I think that's still Deadpool 1, but I understand why people really loved this movie. It was just a nostalgia trip. It was, hey, you remember that thing you liked from movies in the past? Here it is again. And that will get us every single time. So I think the movie actually really worked to a good level like that. And it brought a lot of people, obviously, into the theaters. I'm going to bring out a chart. I just didn't have time to make it. I'm still on the mend. I'm just getting back to kind of doing my normal routine now. And I want to add a new chart to the show where I just kind of track Deadpool and Wolverine versus Inside Out 2, which is still in the top 10 and it's still doing great numbers. And it's obviously the highest grossing movie of the year, but can Deadpool and Wolverine catch it? Inside Out 2 has been out for 10 weeks, Deadpool and Wolverine only 4. And I kind of want to do a chart just to see where they were day to day and which one's kind of making more money. So expect to see that chart next week. The other thing I kind of want to talk about a little bit is It Ends With Us. We're going to talk about it because it's still in the top 10, still made quite a bit of money here in its second weekend, but it opened up extremely well last weekend. I didn't know about this movie. I don't know that it's a book. I've never read it, but apparently over $50 million worth of people have read this book and wanted to see this movie, which is fantastic. I understand it already is an IP, but it's so much different than all the other stuff that's out there right now. So yes, it's a book. Yes, it's not original. I don't care. It's nice to see that there's variety in the theaters right now, and people are willing to go to the theater to see these things. I hope Hollywood takes note of, like, you can give us the big Deadpool and Wolverine style movies, but also give us these smaller movies like It Ends With Us, because people do want to see that stuff. So it's really nice to see that variety in theaters, a little bit of something for everyone. And then obviously Inside Out 2 is just out there crushing every movie right now. It's making so much money. It's past Barbie from last year, which we all thought was one of the biggest movies of all time, just because of the reach that it had and how long it played. And here comes Inside Out 2, just kind of sneaking right past it. And I don't feel like a lot of people are talking about it, so just kind of want to make note of that. What else? Robert Downey Jr. is cast as Doctor Doom in the MCU. Terrible decision, really. Like, why? Who cares? But I've already talked about that in a previous episode. What I did want to talk about, though, is the fact that it was reported now he's going to make well over $80 million for his 2 appearances. I guess 3 appearances. He's going to appear probably in a post-credit scene in the Fantastic Four, and then he's going to be in the 2 Avengers movies, Doomsday and Secret Wars, and he's going to make well over $80 million. It just screams desperation, guys. It doesn't really make sense. Do not pay this man this money. I don't think they're going to get a return on investment like they think they're going to, and it just seems like a huge waste of money. And that's such a shame, because Marvel has been such a big part of many people's lives for the last, 16 years now? And it just feels like they're at an end point now. They're at an end game, and they might be done. So, okay. But what you guys all come here for is the weekly box office report. How well are movies doing over the past weekend? And so let's go ahead and jump into it right now with the top 5 from this past weekend. In first place is Alien Romulus with $42 million. That is A big opening. It's not a great opening, but it's probably more than they were expecting, considering the last two Alien movies weren't very well received. They made some money, but nobody really cared. They kind of disappeared out of the zeitgeist and out of the consciousness of many people right after they came out. So I don't know if a lot of people expected this movie to be good, yet critics are raving about it, audiences are absolutely loving it. I have a feeling this one's going to hold really well in its second weekend. I haven't seen it yet. Obviously, with recovering, I haven't been to the theater. There's a lot going on, but I do want to see this one. It looks fantastic, and I've heard a lot of good things about it, so it's nice to see that maybe we've gotten back to the Alien that we all remember growing up with. In second place is Deadpool and Wolverine in its fourth week, finally getting bumped out of the top spot with another $30 million, a 46% drop. But take a look at that massive number in just 4 weeks. $546.8 million at the domestic box office. That's insane, guys. That is like, I don't think MCU could ever have dreamt of that. This has made more money in 4 weekends than almost half of the other MCU movies made in their entire run. So it's very impressive. Congratulations to Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine, because they are now the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. Congrats. In third place is It Ends With Us in its second weekend, with another $23.8 million brought in, just a 52% drop, about what was expected of a fall for this movie. But you can see in just 2 weeks, it's almost made $100 million for this small kind of film that's just a very dramatic story. It's nice to see it made $100 million in just 2 weekends. This isn't one that I really want to go check out, but with those kind of numbers, I might have to. In fourth place is Twisters in its fifth week. This movie's doing great as well. It brought in another $10 million, just a 33% drop for $238 million here domestically so far. I still prefer the original, but it's nice to see this movie getting a lot of love. And in fifth place is Coraline. Yes, the movie that came out over a decade ago. In fact, it's been 15 years since that movie came out. They remastered it and they re-released it in 3D, and it brought in $9.6 million over this re-release weekend. Good enough for fifth place. In sixth place is Despicable Me 4 in its seventh week with another $6.2 million, 22% drop, and it's still making a ton of money, $340.6 million domestically. And in seventh place is Inside Out 2 in its 10th week. You got that back-to-back of those family animated films here. Inside Out 2 made $3.4 million this past weekend, a 28% drop. But as you can see, it's made all the money this year. It is far and away the highest grossing movie of the year with $642 million. In eighth place is Trap in its third week with another $3.4 million, a 48% drop. $35 million so far, which is pretty healthy. That's landing it somewhere around Knock at the Cabin from last year, also by M. Night Shyamalan. So it seems to be he's kind of found his place. He makes these low-budget films for, under $10 million, and they can make about $40 to $50 million at the theaters, which is most likely going to make it profitable. In ninth place, in just its second weekend, is a disaster of a movie. I know I didn't touch upon it at the beginning because I don't really think it deserves that much with the negative reviews that it's getting. It's Borderlands. $2.4 million, a 72% drop. That is a drop that is usually held for movies that made $150 million in its opening weekend. Like Deadpool and Wolverine made $214. If it would have dropped 72%, that would have made a lot of sense. It's hard to live up to that big of a number. But considering Borderlands last week only made $8.8 million in its opening weekend, to fall 72% is just laughable. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes to streaming probably within the next couple of days here, and they're going to pull it from theaters as soon as they can because right now it is basically a laughingstock and nobody's going to see it. It's only made $13.6 million in that 2 weeks. And rounding out the top 10 is a movie called Stree 2. It's a foreign film. It made $2.1 million. It's new to the list. It'll be gone next week, but it's always nice to see these films jump in for at least that one time. A lot of movies fell out of the top 10 since we last checked in, so let's go ahead and go through all of them. After just 1 week, The Fabulous Four, The Firing Squad, and Cuckoo were all in the top 10 and then fell out. Harold and the Purple Crayon, another disaster of a movie, dropped out after 2 weeks. Fly Me to the Moon a couple weeks ago fell out after 3 weeks, along with Maxine after 4 weeks. Longlegs, after a very impressive showing at the domestic box office, finally falls out of the top 10 after 5 weeks. A Quiet Place Day 1, also a strong 6 weeks, but finally falls out. And then Bad Boys Ride or Die, a movie that I don't think anybody expected to be as big as it was, but it finally falls out of the top 10 after 9 solid weeks. Here's a chart we haven't looked at in, obviously a couple of weeks. So let's kind of go back and take a look at where we've been. 2 weeks ago, or should I say 3 weeks ago, the first show that I missed, we fell just short. After Deadpool and Wolverine put us over 2023, we fell short the week after here in 2024, where we only made $169 million in Deadpool and Wolverine's second weekend on top, compared to Barbie's second weekend on top, third weekend on top, apologies. But last year they made $178 million. And then in the 32nd weekend, which was last week, we jumped back ahead here for 2024 when all the movies together brought in $157.6 million compared to 2023's $115.5 million. So that was a nice bump back up. And then this past weekend, 2024 stayed ahead again. The 33rd weekend, $139 million for 2024 versus only $96 million in 2023. Led then by the opening of Blue Beetle, which was a very big disappointment at the box office, and obviously Alien Romulus is what opened up big this past weekend. Let's go ahead and take a look at the top 10 movies of 2024, and there has not been that much movement since the last time we saw this chart a couple weeks ago. In fact, there's only been one change. Inside Out 2 is still the #1 movie. Deadpool 3 is in second place here, a little under $100 million behind. Is it going to reach that over the coming weeks? I'm not quite sure, but it's going to be a very interesting race to follow. Despicable Me 4 comes out in third place with $340 million. Doom Part 2 still hanging around in fourth place here with that $282 million. And here's where we get that change. Twisters jumps up one spot into fifth place with $238 million. Godzilla and Kong, The New Empire, falls to sixth with just $196 million. The rest of the list all kind of plays out the same. Kung Fu Panda 4 is in seventh. Bad Boys Ride or Die is in eighth. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes comes out in ninth. And A Quiet Place Day 1 is still hanging on to that 10th spot. There is one little note here. Bad Boys Ride or Die is still playing in theaters. Very small number of theaters, but it is still playing. And I wonder if they're trying to get past Kung Fu Panda 4. As you can see, they're only about $120,000 apart. So if it can play for another 2 weeks, it has a very good chance of jumping up into that 7th spot. I'm not sure if that's something that they're tracking or really care about. It's not like you're jumping into the top 5. But, sometimes movie studios are petty and they just want to be able to say they beat that other studio. All right, and something obviously that we do here every week on the show is a flashback to a movie from the past to see how well it did at the box office. Was it profitable, or did it lose the studio a ton of money? And in honor of Alien Romulus coming out this week, I want to do something from the Alien franchise, but I did not want to do the original Alien. It was a big hit. And I didn't want to do Aliens because it was also a big hit. So I decided let's go ahead and take a look at Alien 3. This is a movie that not a lot of people loved when it first came out. It got a bigger following when it came to DVD and they put the extended cut, extra 30 minutes worth of footage back into the movie, and it did change quite a bit about it and made the movie better. I'm not sure why they just didn't release it in that format in the first place, but they didn't, and that is what it is. But I wanted to take a look at this one because it's part of this massive franchise, which we know Alien and Aliens were big hits, made a ton of money for the studio. But could they keep that going with a movie that not many people loved? Let's go ahead and take a look at Alien 3's estimated box office. In domestic week 1, it brought in $26.8 million. Studios kept 60% of that for only $16 million. Domestic week 2, another $11 million made for the movie, but the studio only got to keep $6 million of that, 55%. Domestic week 3 plus, the rest of its run, it brought in a measly $16.8 million. Studios only got 50% of that, so 8.4 million. Internationally, did really well, another 104.3 million. Studios got that 40%, so 41 million went into their pockets for that. It did not get a Chinese release, so there's no number there. The budget for Alien 3, which is crazy considering the original Alien had a budget of around 10 million, Aliens had a budget of around 15 to 20 million, and then all of a sudden you get this massive jump up to $55 million for Alien 3. Why? I don't know. Where'd the money go? Definitely don't know. Marketing, conservative number here of about $40 million. This was a really big market for this movie. They put a lot of ads out, so that number might be a little bit higher, but I felt like this was a good number to go with. Gross, the movie brought in $159.2 million worldwide. After the studios took their cut of that number, the movie was left with $72.4 million going back to the studio, but they still had to pay for that marketing and that production budget. So the movie actually ended up losing the studio an estimated $22.5 million. But what's crazy about that is, even though it was a loss, they definitely made that money up in home video rentals and toy markets. But this is a movie that people kind of despised for many, many years. So when you hear people talk about it, it seems like this was one of the biggest failures in the history of Hollywood. Nah, it only lost 22 million. That's actually not that bad. There's a ton of other movies that would probably have killed to only lost 22 million. Like The Flash from just last year, which lost over $100 million at the box office and definitely didn't make that up in secondary markets. So Alien 3, not as much of a failure as you probably thought it was. All right, that's it for the box office this week. Thank you for joining me. Thank you anybody who came back to watch this and for being patient while I took some time off to kind of get myself right. I'll be back again next week. Hopefully nothing else goes wrong. But I'll be back again next week with another box office update on Tuesday. In the meantime, we release daily fun facts and some other random videos throughout, like new movie reviews, news, and a couple essay series that should be coming up here shortly as well. So make sure you like, subscribe, do all that stuff that YouTube likes so you never miss a video. And until I see you next time, just remember to be good to yourself, be kind to others, and keep watching movies.